Well, as businesses shut their doors to curb the virus, there is still no financial aid coming from Washington. Let's now bring in Bloomberg News congressional reporter Eric Wasson, who has reported extensively on the ongoing stimulus battle. Eric, thank you for joining us. Your latest reporting shows that the Treasury Secretary is willing to restart stimulus talks with Democrats, and he's doing so by proposing tapping money earmarked for the Federal Reserve. Now, the Fed has now agreed to return that money. How unusual of a proposal was this?
Well, it was in some ways very much expected. The CARES Act, which passed in March, pretty much set the expiration date of the end of this year for these monies. But at the time, it was not expected that the pandemic and the economic consequences would be lasting as long as they have. In fact, the White House had been talking about a V-shaped recovery. That didn't materialize. And Jay Powell, in responding to Mnuchin yesterday, said he would prefer to have these lending authorities available in case they're needed in the spring. So now he's returned that. And Mnuchin called Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, today and talked about perhaps dangling this money in front of deficit hawks and saying we could use this to, in some ways, pay for or make up for a new round of stimulus for the economy that actually gets out the door. The Fed had not been really employing these Main Street lending facilities. However, that is not really necessarily getting much traction with Democrats so far.
Of course not. How much money are we talking about here in terms of clawing back some of the money that was earmarked for the Fed? Because the two sides are so far apart on how much money is needed for stimulus.
Well, look, it's less than $500 billion, but when you add in the PPP leftover money of $123 billion, it comes to about $580. But one thing I point out in the piece in the Bloomberg, under congressional budget rules, you can't unspent loan money can't be used to pay for other spending because the CBO assumes that those loans would be repaid back. So failing to make loans that would be repaid back doesn't earn you anything. So in many ways, it's a bit for show. It won't really allow the deficit score to go down. Democrats are not really budging. They're continuing to talk about a $2.4 trillion bill. McConnell's still talking about a $500 billion bill. Perhaps they have some flexibility, but we're not yet seeing real talks on a stimulus being rejoined yet.
Yeah, so the gap is as wide as ever. Now, we know talks between the two sides have been on hold for weeks. And this week, Pelosi and Schumer on the Democrat side wrote to Mitch McConnell asking him to return to the negotiating table on stimulus talks. Does that mean that the GOP has the upper hand here in any discussions that do take place?
Well, it's hard to see who has the upper hand. With the Biden administration coming in, admittedly, the GOP is not acknowledging that that's going to happen. And the Senate, the control is still very much up in the air. I think it's probably likely the GOP retains the Senate, but it's possible the Democrats take it. If they had the Senate in hand, they would indeed have the upper hand, be able to pass a major stimulus after January 20th, they have it signed into law. But, there's a separate issue here. After that letter was sent by Pelosi and Schumer, there was a meeting between staff on a separate omnibus bill. That's to keep the government funded after December 11th when funding runs out. And there was some hope by Pelosi that this would turn into a stimulus discussion, but McConnell's people were not having any of that. And that remains on a separate track.
Very quickly, Eric, you've been covering the ins and outs of Congress for a decade now, and it's tempting to say that this particular Congress is more dysfunctional than ever. Is there any reason to think it won't get any worse after the new Congress is sworn in?
I think it may very well do so. There's a lot of momentum on the right to declare the Biden presidency illegitimate in this attempt by President Trump to say he's had the election stolen. So, we very well could see a blockade in the Senate of Biden appointments and him being unable to even fulfill his cabinet. We're looking on the lookout for that. But if that really gains steam, there could be a lot of incentives for Republicans to stymie everything, in which case, we would see very little get done.
Yeah. Eric Wasson joining us from Washington with a big reality check. Thank you so much.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.